My cardboard dollhouse, in continuing my plan of making things out of materials that I already had on hand and recycling materials to keep my cost low, I made 2 beds from an iPhone box. The headboards have a gentle, tough design. I say gentle because they do not have deep impressions. In this video, I will show you my process of making the beds. Apple products always have such really nice boxes. I hate to throw them away, so I wind up saving them all, and I have a collection of them. First, I cut 4 legs for each bed from a 1/4-inch square dowel. The length will vary between the 2 boxes. The legs will be glued into the corners of the box. So determine how high you want the bed to be lifted from the floor to determine the length of the bed legs. For the smaller of the 2 beds, I cut them 3 centimeters in length. They were a little bit bigger for the bed made from the box cover. I switched the clamps to hold in the other direction partway through the setting process. I am using tacky glue for this project. Glue the legs in place, right in the corner. I use clips to help them glue nice and tight. Once glued into place, you can paint the legs. I do not paint the very bottom because there's no need to do that. For the mattress, I used a single layer of foam core and a thin layer of foam packing material glued together. I save everything. Cut the mattress about a 1/4 inch shorter than the length of the box because the tufted headboard will sit on top of the box at the head of the bed. I used a scrap piece of white cotton to cover the mattress, which is essentially the bottom sheet. I cover the mattress with the white cotton using tacky glue to hold it in place. My favorite choice for an all-purpose glue. Wrap it up like you would a present. I do cut some of the bulk off the 2 ends before folding it over. You want all the folds on the underside of the mattress. Try to keep the underside as flat as possible. Then glue the mattress onto the box. Remember, there's going to be a little 1/4 inch at the top of the bed where the headboard's going to sit. Now it's time to make the tufted headboard. Cut the foam core in the shape that you want for the headboard. I liked the curve. It's nice and simple, but you can do any shape you want. Keep in mind, this will sit on top of the box. Decide the height you want. I made mine about 2 1/4 inch height from the center of the curve to the top of the bed. To help the headboard stand erect, I cut 2 forms from tagboard. It should match the shape of the headboard, but make it long enough to go all the way down to the bottom edge of the box. Cut 2 of them and glue them together. My plan is to use the lighter fabric for the front of the headboard, but a tone darker for the back side of the headboard. Cut 1 for each. Add an extra 1/2 inch larger all the way around because we're going to wrap that fabric around the foam core or the tagboard. Using quilt batting, cut 3 layers for the front and 2 layers for the back. For the 3 layers on the front, each one should be slightly smaller than the previous layer, so the very center will be thicker than the outer edges. On the foam core cutout, mark a grid pattern, drawing the lines a 1/2 inch apart. I made my lines on the diagonal because I just thought that better. Then, with a large needle, poke holes through the foam core in the corners where the lines intersect. Glue the smallest layer of batting on the opposite side of the foam core, not the side with the grid. Then add the next larger layer. The first 2 layers are glued, but do not put glue on the final 3rd layer. Next, the fabric layer. Flip these layers over so that you're now looking at the grid. Using masking tape, bring the fabric layer around the side and onto the grid side. The tape will hold the fabric in place. Clip the curves. Do not cut too close to the foam core. Don't come any closer than a 1/4 inch. The cut should be less than a 1/2 inch apart. The clips will help the fabric to lay down flat as it comes around. As you place the tape, mark where the holes are so you don't lose their location. because it's all going to be covered up with fabric and tape. I chose a coordinating thread, a shade darker than the fabric front. I'm using linen thread, but you could use embroidery floss for this. Embroidery floss is 6 ply, so you might need to divide it into 2 or 3 ply. Switching to a smaller needle. I thread the needle using a needle threader. Insert the needle into one of the holes from the back side, coming out onto the fabric side. I didn't have any matching buttons or beads small enough, so I've decided to do a French knot in place of a button or a bead. Wrap the thread around the needle 3 times and then insert the needle very near to the same hole, returning back to the back side. Be sure to keep the thread taut on the back and on the front while doing the French knot before you pull it all the way through. Continue with all the holes until you run out of thread. Here is how to start a new thread. Leave a long tail. Hold the tail while doing the French knot. Continue this way until you have a knot in each of the holes. Cover the back panel the same way you did the front, clipping the curves, taping each section down. We will glue the back to the front, but before we do that, we need some piping. I made my own pipe so that I would have the perfect color. I used the darker color. I chose a gauge of string that was large enough to fill in the gap between the front and back. Because the piping will go around a curve, it was necessary to clip it, putting those clips fairly close together. I used Eileen's Fabric Fusion to glue fabric to fabric. Tacky glue will also do the job. To finish off the ends, remove the threads to open the piping up so that you can trim off the excess string. The ends can then be folded neatly away. You may need to trim off some of the extra bulk of the fabric at the corners, but only cut the most inner fabric, not the outside, because you need the outside to glue down. Now we are ready to glue the back panel to the front panel. For this, I use tacky glue. The lower section will glue to the end of the box. If you use clamps like I did, don't leave them on too long because they might make an impression in your fabric. You could just hold everything very tightly together until the glue sets. It could take up to 20 minutes. Here is our finished bed frame. It's cute. This is for a 1/12 scale dollhouse. Now to dress it. My pillows were cut 3 inches by 2.5 inches, cut 2 per bed. Sew right sides together, leaving a small opening so you can turn it. Clip corners before turning. Stuff with batting. I do the batting little bits at a time. Don't use a great big glob and stick it in, just a little at a time, and just keep adding a little bit more until you think it's right. It doesn't have to be really tight. If you pack it too tight, the pillow won't flatten down at all, and it just won't look as natural. So it can be fairly loose, so it's a softer pillow. I use a small dowel to push the batting especially into the corners. Then I use the blind stitch to sew up the small opening. I do show and explain how the blind stitch works in one of my sewing videos. Right now I cannot think of what video that is, but I'll link it in the description below. The size of my pillow shams were 3.5 inch by 4 inch. I sewed 3 sides and left one end open like a pillowcase. Fold the open end inside, folding it over twice, pinning it, and sew from the inside as you stitch the raw ends down. So now you have an opened end still, but it's got a finished edge. Now I didn't show it, but I top stitched 1 centimeter around the 3 sewn sides for the pillow sham look. After I inserted the pillow, I then added self-adhesion Velcro tabs to close up the open end. The blanket is cut 9 inch by 7 inch. I used one color for the inside and one for the outside, the same 2 colors I used on the front and back of the headboard. I did not use any batting inside the blanket because that can make it too thick and it may not lay right. Sew right sides together, leaving an opening on one side. Clip the corners before turning. Turn. and close up the opening with either the blind stitch, or you can sew a top stitch all the way around the blanket, staying very close to the edge. So there you have it. 2 beds made from one iPhone box. This was a pretty simple project, and it didn't take too long to pull together. The iPhone box cover made a slightly bigger bed than the bottom of the box. One of the beds will go into my cardboard dollhouse, whereas the other will be a gift for my granddaughters who are getting a new dollhouse for Christmas. I found a good use for the nice boxes, and that means less trash going to a landfill. I like the idea of repurposing things. Give it a try. Thanks for watching.